So this is a video of my top 10 favorite locomotives for my collection. Each of these engines, for multiple reasons, are in my favorite, though some of them do have issues which bring them down from like higher spots, but a lot of them have not had any problems and are just all around amazing engines. So starting with the semi-scale Berkshire. This one is particularly my custom Paramore number 1226, but it still counts for like the semi-scale Berkshire because the Polar Express was my first locomotive, and it was a semi-scale Berkshire, a 2013 model in particular, the Lion Chief 1. And this was been very influential on my collection, and I just had a long history with the semi-scale Berkshire, which is why I made the number 10 spot. And something that brings it down is because it's conventional only, and it doesn't have like any command features or like speed control or anything like that, but it's still an amazing locomotive and I love it. The next one is the Pennsylvania Railroad Baby K4 5400. The main reason I chose 5400 was because of the striping with the number, as well as on the tender. And the two main things that bring this locomotive down for me are, one, it's semi-scale, so it doesn't have as many details, and it's also puny compared to my high-end models. And it died within like 4 months. Cause like I literally just put the engine on the track. I hadn't really like abused the engine at all, and it just died. Like smoke came out from like around the bell, like from underneath, like where the bell is on the, like the length of the engine. And while the engine was still functional, like still ran, the sound system was dead. But after a month of it being repaired, it came back and it's been fine ever since. The next one is the MTH Premier Dreyfuss Hudson. And the reason it's so low on the list is two things. Firstly, the traction tires just work themselves off this engine. Like, they would frequently, and I mean frequently, fall off the drive rails. So this engine doesn't have that much pulling power. Secondly, especially in conventional mode and with like mainly incandescent lights, the Dreyfuss Hudson is also extremely slow, or at least like slower than it should be. And when there's no incandescent light bulbs around it that are taking power, it, like the sound for the whistle and bell just freak out. It's pretty weird. And speaking of the sounds, they also cut out a lot. I'm not sure how to get this fixed, so if anyone knows like how to fix it, or like any suggestions of like where to take it to get it fixed or anything like that, please do let me know in the comments. I'd really appreciate that. But it's still a very beautiful locomotive and I do love it a lot. The next one is the New York Central 763E 5344. This one, the main issue I have with it is since it's a 1997 model, it has a pole motor, which is kind of noisy, but I don't mind the sound. It's more the slow speed. This locomotive runs at a crawl, especially with like heavy trains, and the Hudsons are supposed to be fast engines, so it is kind of annoying having such a slow engine. But the sounds on this engine are great. It never had any major problems. It's been very reliable, especially being pretty old. So I can't knock it too much, and it's a great engine. Next up is the Chesapeake and Ohio Yellow Belly Hudson, the L1. This locomotive, the main issues with it are the headlight doesn't always work. It basically like picks and chooses when it decides to work. It hasn't been working for like the past few videos, so like when I ran it with the Dreyfuss Hudson, it didn't have the headlight because it just doesn't work. And there's a broken wire in the tender, which causes the chuff to not work. I'm not sure how that happened because this is a used engine, but that's like the only functional issue. Other than that, for being the same mechanism as the Dreyfuss Hudson, the J1E or 763E, this engine is really fast. And it does actually have great pulling power, though it will wheel slip with like the George Washington being such a heavy train. But this locomotive is a very nice one. Next is the Vision Line Big Boy, number 4012. I chose the 4012 in particular because it was the first Big Boy I saw in person, and so far the only one I've seen in person. So I have a lot of like personal experience with this engine. I saw it for the first time back in like 2015 before it was restored cosmetically, and then once again in 2022 post restoration. So I of course had to choose the 4012 because of that like sentimental value. But it has some issues because of course it does. And the main issues were that right out of the box, one of the rubber bands on the rear sand dome broke, so I could never use the pop-off valve smoke unit. Otherwise, smoke would just leak into the dome and ruin like everything, cover the whole like control board in residue. And a few other problems accumulated over time throughout 2024. And in like September, I think. Yeah, like early September, I sent this engine out to be repaired. It came back after about a month, and it was dead. Straight up dead. The tender was just fine though, but whenever I put the locomotive on the track, it would just short out. I don't know what was wrong with it, but it just shorted out the layout, it wouldn't work, and it was just a disaster. So then it was out a second time, and upon coming back, it's been perfectly fine. Though Lino never told us what was wrong the second time around. They only talked about like the first time with like the papers they give you whenever you repair or get something repaired from them. But the point is, I don't know what happened with this engine to cause it to short out. But it is good now, so I don't really care. Though, despite the sentimental value it has, those issues definitely took points off for it, which is why it's all the way down. But next is the Pennsylvania Railroad number 9628. This is my second MTH Premier model. The Dreyfuss Hudson's a Protosom 2. This is a Protosom 3. And this locomotive has been absolutely perfect. It has great pulling power. The sounds, aside from the whistle, because I don't really like the very shrill whistle, but I don't hate it. So I can at least tolerate it, but it's just not my favorite. But this engine, ever since I got it, was absolutely amazing. Though, unfortunately, I couldn't run it conventionally, so I had to get the TIU to run it. So that's basically the story of how I got the MTH TIU, because I had to get it to run this engine. And now that I have it running, it's been like perfectly fine. There's one mild discrepancy, and that is like the motor makes like kind of a squeaky noise. I haven't been able to get in there to fix it, but other than that, this locomotive has had zero issues. So it's been a great one. And now into the top three. we have the Lionel Legacy Polar Express to start it off. At first, I didn't like the other whistles except for whistle 1, but I have grown more fond of whistles 3 and 5 in particular. Whistle 4 is okay, and then whistle 2 can just not exist. Like, having like a French locomotive horn, which I believe that's how it's supposed to be, it just doesn't fit an American steam engine, and the sound is just, I don't like it personally, so it's my least favorite. And I have wanted to get particularly the gold Polar Express from the 10th anniversary, if only it wasn't so rare and expensive. Anyways, but I remember seeing that gold Polar Express and this black one from the 10th anniversary, and I've wanted for years to get one of them, but I would never have the luck of actually finding one. Until last year, 2024, when in the Volume 1 catalog, they made it again. And I had my fingers crossed that gold Polar Express would be back. But then Lionel was like, no, you get either a red or that freaking plasma locomotive. Like that plasma blue and red scheme, like whatever the frick it is, I just call it like the glittery mess because I don't, it's my least favorite paint scheme of the 3. And then the red one is just why? I don't really like it that much. So I opted for the black one, because since they didn't offer the gold one, and they just had the black one, because the other 2 liveries sucked, and the black one's my favorite of the 3, I got that original black one, as well as the matching passenger cars, though they wouldn't get here until like last week, like last Wednesday, I think. Maybe, I forgot. Actually, no, I think it was a Tuesday I got them. But the point is, like, this locomotive had to run without its coaches for a while. And in one of my videos where I ran it in 1521 at night with the blue LEDs, I had to pull the semi-skilled coaches because they were the only Polar Express coaches I had at the time. And then, of course, I made a video about the new Polar Express coaches, and that video went literally out of the park in views. Like, the fact it broke 4K. I still don't know what to say. Like, I did not expect that video to blow up, and thanks to everyone who viewed it, as well as a bigger thank you to everyone who subscribed. But anyways, back to the engine. The main thing I want to talk about real quick is the slight differences between this and the 10th anniversary model, as well as the 2017 release. That main thing being this number board down here below the headlight, because originally it was black, so there was no 1225 number, but now on the release they added the 1225. So that's just another little detail that they added. The next engine is the F19 in number 2. This locomotive is a gem. That just straight up. And I personally prefer this one, the TMCC model, over the Legacy one, mainly because of the bell. Because they did bring the original whistle back, but they didn't bring the original bell back, and I prefer the one that this TMCC model has, so I opted to get it. But that's not the main reason. That main reason was that I had already pre-ordered the George Washington 491 in 2023, and after over a year, it was no show from the F19, so I think October or like early November, somewhere around that time frame, I forgot exactly, I opted to get this one, the TMCC model. So now that I have that one, the TMCC F19, I already had the 491 canceled, so there's no Legacy F19 in my collection. But after hearing mainly the bell on the Legacy model and how it sounds like basically every other bell from most of the Legacy engines, it's just kind of mid, and I much prefer this one. And before moving on to number 1, the main thing I love about these TMCC models, aside from like having the incandescent lights for like headlights and cowlights and whatever, which looks a lot nicer than the LEDs, is that a lot of these engines, the majority have unique sound effects. And they didn't have like 5 whistles and like 5 bells, as well as like bell sounds that sounded like every other bell, and like mainly the chuffing sounds are reused so much throughout several engines. And I much prefer the TMCC sounds because they're a lot more varied and unique. But now it's my favorite, the C&O 1521. I'm pretty sure this one was a no-brainer for quite a few people. Maybe? Probably not. Yeah, probably not. But that's mainly because I've changed my profile picture 4 times on the channel, and the 1521 has been in every single one. And I first got the 1521 for Christmas in 2022, but that one is not the same as this one, because that old model sent it out to be repaired because it had a few issues, such as like the missing cow catcher. And I sent it out back in like April of 2023, and as of January of 2025, it's been a no-show. So I decided to replace it, and I have to say, I'm really happy I just straight up replaced the 1521 I had before, because this one is in much better shape and it performs a whole lot better. Because there's no paint chips on the corners for the running board on either side, and the cow catcher's there, and the classification lights don't flicker. It's also been better in conventional mode too, because it doesn't have just like one speed stop. But yeah, these are my top 10 favorite locomotives.